Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Sometimes life interrupts everything, your routine, your sense of stability. And in those moments, the question becomes, how do I keep going? 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 Should I continue? Should I stop? Should I pause? And what happens when you almost stop? Well, welcome to our conversation today. Welcome to our April Breaking Through conversation. Thank you so much for joining us, and let us know from where you are joining us from. Once again, there are seasons in life where everything changes. Everything changes. And you ask yourself, how can I continue? But today I'm joined by someone whose journey reflects resilience, strength, and determination. She is a pharmacist, a mother of two, a wife, a friend, a sister, an auntie, and someone who has navigated a significant health challenge while continuing to move forward in her life, in her career, in her role as a mother, as a friend, as a wife, not just surviving, but still showing up. Thank you so much for being here, Belinda. Would you mind? You are very, very welcome. Would you mind sharing one fun fact about you and adding any details that I have missed from the introduction?
I think you got it all. Fun fact. I I've been married for almost 30 years. Um, in October. And I have an amazing husband who have just been supportive. And so I am just grateful to my family for just their support. And above all, I'm a child of God, and I am just at awe at what God has done, what God is doing, and trusting in Him for what He is yet to do.
Fantastic. Let me ask you a question. You are an immigrant, right?
Yes,
Okay.
I moved here from Ghana when I was 12 years old.
Okay. Welcome. And once again, welcome everyone. Let us know where you are joining us from, and we will go through and give you a shout out. Belinda, I want to start at that moment when everything shifted. As we've talked, as we've sent out our flyer and, talked to people about today's conversation, you had a major health crisis, right? And I want
Right.
you to take us to that moment where everything shifted. Take us to that season, what was happening in your life, you know, just take us on that journey. Throw back a little bit.
Sure, absolutely. Um, Things kind of changed around pretty significant for me around 2010, when my hepatologist told me that it was time for me to get on the transplant list for liver transplant. I had been kind of told this some years back, almost 15 years back, that I would eventually need a liver transplant, which at that time I was young. I was like, that's not me. And so to highlight a little bit from where um, I came from to get to this time of change, I have basically been living with a liver disease for a very long time. At the age of 15, just 3 years after immigrating to the United States, I was diagnosed with inflammatory bowel disease, ulcerative colitis, for which still there's no cure, inflammation in the lining of the colon, and its complications. Um, so life as a teenager wasn't all that great, but I made the best of it because the symptoms of ulcerative colitis is bloody diarrhea, nausea, vomiting, anemia, tiredness. So imagine trying to go out with friends or, trying to get through a school day. But I graduated high school. I went to undergrad 2 hours away from home in Chicago. And then my third year in college, I was having issues again, and some testing led to um, being diagnosed now with the complications, one of the complications of colitis, which is something called primary sclerosing cholangitis. And forgive me for my big medical terms,
Yeah,
but
so if you if
I'll
if
explain it. And
yes.
for the purposes of this, I'm going to call it PSC.
Yes.
Basically, it's your gallbladder releases something called bile to break down fats in your body, but the duct that leads from the liver to the gallbladder gets inflamed. So then bile backs up to the liver, end up killing the liver cells. But the liver is a very dynamic organ and one of the organs, or I think the only organ in the body that regenerates itself. So keep regenerating over time, over time, over time. So I was told that eventually in about 10 years or so, to survive, I would need a liver transplant.
Okay,
So 19
Belinda,
years down the line.
let me stop you here. So 3 years after you've come to America, land of green pastures, you are diagnosed with this inflammatory bowel disease. How did you
Mhm.
feel? How did it, you are in high schooler, you are a high schooler. How did just take us to that moment when you were told and how you felt and how you dealt with it?
It was hard, but it was like, I just, you're sick. I think I didn't know the brevity of it or its complications or where I will end up years later. But it required a few hospitalization here and there. It required taking medication every day. So managing, my mom and my dad were there, helped a lot. We had aunties and uncles that if I needed to go to the hospital, that would take me through. Even and my friends were very, very supportive during that time. My best friend from that time up until now have constantly been with me. So it was just management, taking very icky medications and back and forth. Um, Support from my friends in the sense that I will have to leave in the middle of the day to go to appointments at school, who would bring me my homework and things like that. So it was rough, but manageable.
So this was high school,
Hmm.
and then you go to college.
Hmm.
And in your third year of college, they tell you
You have a gallbladder disease. Yes,
you have a gallbladder disease.
you have a liver duct, a bile duct disorder. That can cause your liver to fail 10 years down the line, and you will need a liver transplant before
And so what
to
goes in
make it.
your at this point, you're a science major, right? Biology or you're a
Hmm.
science major. What
Hmm.
is going on in your mind? How are you dealing with all this information from inflammatory bowel disease to gallbladder and a possible transplant in 10 years?
To be honest with you, I wasn't thinking like, "Oh, it must just be a thing. It might just be like a book thing that, to just say." It wasn't something that really registered with me until when I got into pharmacy school, when, I was just kind of that by then I moved to Maryland. And it was really, really hitting me physically. And that's when I was like, okay, this thing is for real. And got to get on. I mean, like I say, I was a good patient. I took my meds, I got my labs done, I did my follow ups. So I felt like it should never go left. That I'm on this narrow path, and I'm probably gonna live this for the rest of my life. But I'll be okay.
Okay. So third year, they tell you 10 years down the line. And then what happened?
And then, like I said, I finished college. I took a year off. I came to Maryland, came to pharmacy school, and during pharmacy school, I did have a few hospitalization. That's when I knew, like, okay, I'm really sick, but you know what, we're gonna make the best of it. Finished pharmacy school. I again transferring here, had amazing, amazing medical team that I think took absolutely good care of me. And through those challenges, I managed to get to a place where I was in remission and was able to have non-complicated, uncomplicated pregnancies. I had two amazing boys. So it was after the second one, then again, things started shifting a little bit, that I started having a lot of itching and a little bit of confusion and just really, really just tired. And that's what leads up us to 2010. And finally, them sick with your symptoms, with your labs. I think it'd be time. And at that time, the liver had signs of cirrhosis, had signs of areas being kind of um, dead in a sense, and failing. So that's what led us to 2010, deciding to get on the liver transplant list.
Okay, so just for my sake and for our listeners, you have two boys with this the issue that you are dealing with, and you said you had itching and but when you say confusion, can you explain a little bit more about that?
Sure, the liver, its primary duty really is to filter out toxins from your blood. And when it's failing, it's not able to do that very well. So some of these toxins into your skin causes itching. You can get something called encephalitis, which toxins build up in your brain. That can lead to some of that confusion. You can also have fluid buildup called ascites, which at some point I had gotten that I looked like I was 5, 6 months pregnant. Even people did ask me, if I was pregnant or I was due. And I was like, oh no, it's just fluid. Um, and the jaundice, I can tell from my skin. Myself, I'm a person of, on the darker side, but I was almost black. I was very dark, and that was the jaundice. Um, I didn't get the encephalopathy to the point where I needed meds so much, but I had to be on meds for the itching. My primary thing was the itching and the fluid buildup that made it very uncomfortable um, to eat because I always felt full. And so then I was losing weight, I was losing body mass. The fluid was adding on and putting weight on the scale, but it wasn't real weight, even to the point where losing that body mass will make me too weak to even go through an operation like a liver transplant.
Okay, so we are 2010 when you are told that the situation is getting dire. Before we get into what happened 2010 through the 13, before we get there, at this point, you're still showing up, you're going to work, you're going to church, you're going to family events, friends events. Just what has happened? Then your career was also happening. Can you tell us what was happening with all these things? I mean, you show up and some people don't even know that this is what you're dealing with. So
Mhm,
tell us work, family, even church, and
mhm.
other places that you were.
Yeah, I had to slow down a little bit because my body just wasn't there enough for me to. I wasn't able to go to football and soccer games or practices. So that all fell on my husband. And he gave up so much to be able to be there for the kids. During this time, also, hospitalizations increased. And so I had a great manager who had me apply for intermittent FMLA so that that will protect me when I had to be out or call out because of a hospitalization or because of not being well. So as much as I was showing up, I wanted to make sure that when I showed up, I was there, but I couldn't show up at every single thing. So the boys had to kind of understand that it wasn't a good day, or mom couldn't do this today, or mom couldn't do that tomorrow. But I tried to be the mom. So the home things, it would take me a little while to clean, it would take me a little while to cook. And sometimes I couldn't do all that. And so then my husband stepped in. My mom came also to help us in that sense. That was also the time where I kind of needed to really open up and let others in to help because the help was there. So eventually had to be like, okay, yes, you can come take the kids, or can you take the kids, or I need this, or I need that, or say yes or okay to somebody offering the help. And
So
with work, I eventually also had to take time off. With work, I know that I needed to be there and present every day. Um, there were that intermittent FMLA allowed me to take a day or two off every
Belinda,
month.
explain FMLA. Just
Sure,
family
it's the
medical
Family
leave.
Medical Leave Act that allows employees, generally the larger employees, um, to keep your job. Basically, you're not going to lose your job due to your own illness or family illness. So I had time. It was offered, but it wasn't something that I took upon. But it was a great thing that I did take upon because then that allowed me to continue to also help my husband in that financial aspect and also have insurance because all these things that are going on, trust me, it is not cheap. All these hospitalization. The hospital that I was traveling to from 2010 to 2013, every other month for appointments. University of Pennsylvania and Philadelphia was where my insurance had that I had to travel to, and my insurance paid for all that. So in the back of my mind, I needed to constantly be working until I realized that this FMLA is there for me to protect me
Mm,
and to ensure that I still continue to have
mm,
these liberties of work. I thought that if I didn't show up, that meant that I could lose my job. But thank God for putting people in place. Again, my manager's like, let's do this. It's there for you. Utilize it.
mhm,
um, because back in Chicago when I was a teenager, my parents didn't think about this insurance stuff. So I was telling Sister Marion earlier on that I was made the grantor of my hospital bills, and up until pharmacy school, those hospital bills followed me until I finished paying off those hospital bills from years back because we didn't know at that time. My parents didn't know that this is what they needed to do to make sure that I was taken care of that way.
yeah, those bills from the collection agencies, $10
Yeah.
here, $15 there. So you've shared a lot, and I hear from you that you needed that community support,
Mhm,
and your community was there to support you, whether it
mhm,
was a support at work, your manager, or your friends from high school, or your church family. They really supported you. And that is, I think, that needs to be underscored, that no one can do it alone, and no one should go alone. You
mhm,
always need that support.
mhm, mhm,
So you've told us about all the hospital bills that you were paying, still paying out even when you were in high school. Bills
pharmacy
from
school.
high school through pharmacy school and all that. Now we come to 2010, right?
Mhm,
You've been told that, hey, we need to do something more than what we've been doing now. Tell us about that time up until, you know, don't go into when you actually had your surgery, but tell us from 2010 to about 2012, thereabouts.
mhm. So medically, physically, it was rough. Having had been sick for so long, I'm kind of used to the physical torture or the physical pain that comes along with what I was going through, but the emotionally, I was drained.
Mm,
It got to a point where I was literally in an ICU every other month because I needed blood transfusions. My hemoglobin will fall to like a 5. I was living normally at a 7 for women. 12, it's your normal. But because it had gradually gotten there, my body had gradually gotten used to it. But obviously, it's not normal to walk around with hemoglobin of 5 or 6. So again, my doctors were amazing. They thought out of the box. And my hepatologist thought of helping me to get through a certain procedure to see if I was having bleeding in my portal vein, which is one of the largest vein that supplies the liver. So I had to go do a intervention radiology to do this. When they went in, they said my body contour was a little weird. It was difficult for them to kind of get the probe in there and measure the pressure. However, because of my symptoms, he's really sure that I do have portal hypertension and would like to go in there, put a stent in to help bring down the pressure, and reduce the bleeding. So we do that procedure, and he managed to get in there with another colleague of his, and the pressure was like 10 times the normal what it should be. So they put this stent in, thank God. For 11 months and 11 days, I was without hospitalization, I was without blood transfusion, I was without endoscopy. And then it got to a place where we needed to do something else because the stent wasn't working. So they would go in there and they would extend the stent a little bit. And during one of these procedures, and to be honest with you, a lot of people knew this, but I didn't know this until last year when I was told by my aunt that I coded and almost died on the table doing this procedure. I was like, every year a lot of people call me around that time and we talk, and my aunt was like, oh, we thank God you're here. I remember when Kel called and said we almost lost you. I was like, what? Lost me what? And even Auntie Mary and Erin was telling me, yeah, we heard you almost died once or twice. And I was like,
Yes.
I didn't even know. And then I coded in one of these procedures. And eventually the transplant team in Pennsylvania told University of Maryland, Baltimore, that they could not revise the stent anymore. And so basically at that point, things became a reality that if I had another bleeding episode, and these bleeding episodes were where I would vomit blood, lots of blood, then I knew I had to get to the emergency room. I don't know what would happen. They could give me blood transfusion, but could I bleed out? Could this be the end for me? Would I go into the hospital and not come back? Um, so there were some really rough times. And like I said, there were times where I was so dehydrated I would take 10, 12 um, IV punctures to get an IV line because my veins were just withered, but I could handle those things. But emotionally, what would happen? What would happen with my kids? What would happen with my husband? Was things that were like weighing down on me emotionally. But I never brought myself to a place where I asked God, why me? It was always like, I want to fight. I want to keep holding on. God, you can rewrite my story. You can, whatever you have written concerning me in the books of life, you can change my story. I've been a faithful child. I have walked this walk, and I am not going to go down easily. So I said, Lord, rewrite my story. Um, you know, I've read books where people get to this place and they start to write letters to their kids or letters to their children and their husband. I was like, I'm not doing that because I'm going to be here. I'm going to be here seeing them graduate from high school, graduate from college. Thank God I have. And I'm going to see them being married. And so, God, I'm not doing all of that. So bring on the pain. I can take it, but rewrite my story. And again, this was the time where I was thinking, I need a way out. God, I need you. I need you to come through for me.
Oh, I've never cried on this this platform, never. But you are one person. If there's anybody that we can describe as resilient and strong, Belinda, you are that one person. And thank you for sharing your story, coming out to share your story. And even just what you're saying, that you said to yourself, you would take on the pain because you want to live to see your children.
Mhm.
Thank you for sharing your story. Now, that brings me, I know we are going to get to 2013. So, at this moment, at this point in time, one thing we don't always talk about is what people don't see. From the outside,
Mhm.
people may see you showing up, but they don't always understand what was behind. What is something people at work didn't see or didn't understand about what you were going through?
People at work, I think generally people just knew that I was sick, and I didn't think, and I don't know how many people really knew like what was
House.
wrong or that, I would need a liver transplant to live or to get through that particular year. Um, People didn't know what it took to wake up in the morning. I'm sure people had perceptions like, oh, wow, she's really sick. Oh, wow, she doesn't really look good. Um, People didn't know what it took to be present at work, you know. Um, but again, the it was the grace of God in my life, and God knew what He was doing, even from that moment at 15 until 2013. People did not know that I sat in the bathtub itching so bad that I had a knife that was using to scrape my skin and my body just to get that itching under control. That itching was so bad. Um, when the blood spews to my stomach because I'm bleeding in my esophagus, um, no matter what I took, Zofran, Compazine, no matter what I took, that blood does not want to sit in my belly. It wants to come out. Nobody knew what my husband did. That even to get to work, sometimes he had to wake up early to help me get ready. It wasn't until maybe I got in a car and get going would I perk up a little bit. The many times that, he had to help me wash up, help me get dressed. I'm like, why don't you just stay home today? I'm like, oh, I gotta go. I gotta go. The moments that I had to, um, that when the kids were young, my husband had to be with them and I had to drive myself to the emergency room. And when being discharged, I'm like, yeah, oh yeah, somebody's picking me up. I get in my car and drive and drive home because there was no one picking me up. Um, so the times that I had to literally, I mean, literally crawl out of bed and crawl to the bathroom and crawled up and down the stairs because I was just overwhelmed physically. Um, the times where in the hospital bed, I just didn't want anyone there. I just wanted to be by myself. Um, Nighttime was just the hardest time sometimes when it's just so quiet and everybody's asleep and you're just by yourself with your thoughts, and just have to try to maintain good thoughts. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your story. I haven't even checked to see what the comments are, but let me see the comments. And if you have any comments, please put them in the chat. I'm going to look at the comments right now. If I can see some comments and read out some of the comments that we have now. Oh, people introducing themselves. Strong woman, thank God for you. Wow, there is a God indeed. Mercy. Oh, what an inspiration. Okay, so the comments are going. Belinda, now we come to 2010. Now take us 2010. You go to the doctor's office. By the way, you have said, obviously, you've talked about the support from your medical team as well, but you go to the doctor's office or routine and they say that, now we have to. Means no. I mean, the situation is more serious. Tell us, maybe you were in the doctor's office or whether it was even a virtual call. Tell us what is happening to you and what they said, and then the journey to Pennsylvania.
Um, yes, and fortunately for me for that appointment, my husband Kel was with me. And I was seeing one particular provider, who was now, he had a new fellow who had just finished their program and was like, oh, I'm going to be transferring you to this provider. And I'm looking at my husband, was like, he's a newbie. I'm not a newbie in this. But he was a great newbie. He was a God appointed newbie that did just amazing, work for me, the one that was just thinking outside the box. So basically, they told me what's going to happen. They're going to put a referral in. So one of my sisters, Idana, went with me down to Pennsylvania. We went through the evaluation, and I was put on the transplant list. And
Liver
basically,
transplant. Just for
liver
those who are
transplant
just
list,
joining us, liver transplant.
liver transplant list at University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. And basically was like, it could be a year, it could be 2 years, it could be 10 years. Um, we'll keep you posted. And I keep escaping me the scoring system that they use to list and put you on the list. I came to find at that time there were like over 300 people that needed a liver, just liver, not just organ transplant, but just liver. And their liver program was about 300, and I wasn't in the top 100 at that time. So we just kept praying that it would, we'll move up the list quickly. At some point, I decided to get on what's called an alternative list, which is getting what is not a pure liver, basically someone who maybe had cancer but did not spread to their liver. So a different type. I also came to find out that there is a living donor um, for liver. I thought it was just kidney, but there is one for liver. And so my brother, blood match and went through the process during that during the 2010 to 2013 time. But they were like his pressure was a little bit too high. But they put him on a program, but he had to be without medication for 2 weeks without his pressure going up. And then a week into it, his pressure would start going up. And University of Pennsylvania has a very rigorous transplant program, and they value their success scores. And so they weren't just gonna, and this is a life changing, they didn't want him to end up having issues after the transplant. So basically, they asked him as a candidate.
So your brother was going to be a donor,
Living
a
donor.
living donor.
Hmm.
Can you explain that process a little bit? So,
Yes. So with a living donor, with living liver transplant donor, they would take 2/3 of that donor's liver and transplant it into the recipient. And within 6 months to a year, the liver, that's how dynamic this liver is, would regenerate to a full liver. So he had an advocate for him on the liver transplant team, and so did I. And his advocate, who happened to always also be the surgeon that would perform his surgery if everything went through, was like, no, she doesn't feel comfortable doing it with the blood pressure. And at that time, I was also working in an operating room pharmacy at the University of Maryland, and I met one of the transplant surgeons, and I explained my situation to him, and he was like, "Oh, next year change your insurance to the University of Maryland system insurance." And it's like, we'll do the surgery here. That's not a terrible blood pressure, and with medication, he'll be controlled afterwards. But UPenn did not want to move forward, so now I had to rely on the list for something to come through. And to mention right now, my brother does not have high blood pressure now, so it could have been
wow.
just God's way of just orchestrating that way that he wasn't the one to be the one to give me the liver.
Okay, so explain something to the listeners. You live in Maryland and you were going up and down to, is it Philly, somewhere in
Really.
Pennsylvania?
My insurance at that time did not have University of Maryland as their I had Kaiser as their insurance, so it was UPenn. So yes, traveled back and forth to Philly for 3 years for appointments for those things. Yes,
Wow. And as an immigrant, you had support, but not as much, right? You were
right,
navigating a
right.
lot of things.
Yes, yes, yes. So
So,
I again, my husband had just sacrificed so much. I did, so those drives, I could do those drives an hour and a half from where I live. So I would usually go up on those appointments by myself. He went with me for a few, yes. But for the most part, I handled those. Yeah. Took a day
so
off and drove up.
yeah. So for the 2010 through 2013, what was going on with you? Brother, you couldn't get the liver donor, your brother who could have given you a liver. Now you're back on the list. What was going on with you mentally? And I know that you had said you had Family Medical Leave Act, FMLA here and there. What was going on? Still showing up at work, in different places. What was going on for you?
It was frustrating for sure, that that part was not moving forward. Um, I think I was telling people, "Oh yeah, I should have my transplant by the end of the year." This is 2012. "Oh, we're hoping the end of the year. We're hoping the end of the year," and then not being able to was kind of like, mm, you know. Um, but eventually, I had to take time off. Um, it was just too overwhelming. Um, so again, this family leave, I have the time, I was being paid. There's no reason to not take the time off. Um, my hepatologist also in the transplant team also said, that I was losing too much body mass, and that could be a problem later on. So I needed to just take some time for me, to focus on me, to get myself, hopefully my body right, my mind right. If I wasn't pushing myself so much physically, to keep going to work, to keep showing up, and just that would probably put me in a better place emotionally, psychologically, and physically.
So I'm hearing self-care.
Mhm,
Even at that time, you needed to take care of yourself.
mhm,
Whew. Let me see what is going on in the chat. I hear strong woman. Belinda is my kid's godmother, and they bless. God has indeed. uh, Sorry, my laptop is here. Somebody has sent me a text. Strong woman, strong woman, strong woman. Okay. If you are enjoying this conversation, you're learning something, you're
mhm.
being inspired and motivated, hearing Belinda's story, please take a moment to subscribe if you haven't already subscribed. But if you already subscribed, thank you. And share it with someone who needs to hear this reminder. Belinda, so we come to we've talked about 2010 through end of 2012. Tell us what happens next.
So,
And I'm sure you're also getting messages. I'm sure you're
yeah,
getting
yeah,
messages.
what's the decay join on? So we are at 20, end of 2012. I take some time off. And again, I'm going in pretty much every other month because, the stent thing, with a vein, portal vein is still being corrected. I get to some time where like I'm bleeding a lot, so I'm getting on anti-bleeding medication, and then that causes me to bleed some more. So they call me a bleeder clotter. Um, in 2013, around MLK weekend, um, I had a um, really bad um, episode where, like I feel like I was almost bottoming out. And so ended up at the hospital. I had been having chills and fever for over a year. We couldn't figure out exactly why. Finally, the lab work showed that I had um, infection in my bloodstream. And so I had to, and this was one of my longest hospitalizations. So they had to put an IV line in. In order to put that IV line in, the blood cultures had to show no infection, not necessarily no infection, but had to show something before they can actually put the IV line in. So finally did. They put an IV line in that I can, what they call a PICC line, which I can come home with and give myself these IV antibiotics. And like I said, that was one of the hardest, physically
Mm,
hardest
mm,
hospitalization. And also at this hospitalization, um, the radiologist who was doing the stent revision to prevent the bleeding said that the transplant team has informed him that he couldn't do it anymore because it gets in the field of surgery, which meant that surgery would be a little bit complicated, might be a little bit longer, or even put me out of the game completely. So then I think I did mention that. It's like, so then what happens next when I have another
okay.
bleed out?
Mm, mm. So
So,
explain to our our friends who are listening to us the stent thing.
Mhm.
Explain to them because it's pretty scientific and what does it mean, you
So
know?
it's just kind of like a heart stent where, they put something in the vein that keeps it patent, keeps it open, and keeps blood flowing nicely. So I had explained to Sister Marion earlier, the way they explained it to me is like you have a water in water running in a in a pipe or in a balloon per se, and you squeeze one end, right? The pressure would kick holes in the other end,
Mm,
and so that was what was happening.
mm,
So it would kick holes in like my esophagus. So we went in every time and did what we call an EGD, where they would go inside and there was like outpouching of breakout in the esophagus and it would be bleeding. So they did what's called banding. So they basically put rubber bands
yeah.
around those outpouching to prevent the bleeding. So when the stent gets clotted a little bit and the pressure comes back up and then the bleeding starts. But then, the stents get pushed up more and more or get extended more and more into the portal vein. And the portal vein runs from the liver. And so the higher you go, the more closer you're getting to the liver. And that's why they said that would cause um, an issue there.
Okay, let me ask you this question. So you are a scientist, you're a pharmacist. What is going on in your mind? Now it's you are the patient. What is going on? Yeah. So
I'm
it's
trying I'm trying to understand this all for myself. I ask questions. I don't um my doctors also knowing that I'm a pharmacist, yeah, they talk in layman's terms, but they talk in terms that they know that I would understand.
mm,
A lot of times we've talked about, I'm very involved in my care plan where they will actually even give me um primary literature, what they're looking at to make those decisions and ask me if if I want to look at it. I'm like, no, you're the expert. I'm a pharmacist. I deal in drugs, um, and not so I let the medical team do what the medical team does. I try not to read too much in Google and be like, oh, this could be me or that could be. And if I had a question, I go straight to them.
okay.
So yeah, I keep my place. When it came to the drugs, I try to understand for myself to know, okay, if something was going on, whether it was a side effect, and then knew how to advocate for myself or knew how to bring that up to my doctor.
So speak to somebody who doesn't have a science background,
Hmm.
how to even ask questions. Sometimes
Hmm.
as immigrants, we don't even know how to ask questions, or
Hmm.
we are afraid to ask questions. So
Hmm.
speak to that
Hmm.
person, and then we'll
Hmm.
continue the journey to 2013.
Seek others who might have that scientific background. Um, do a little research. Again, like don't read too much into what you find online. However, oh, I found this online, does this apply to me? Or, can we talk a little bit more about this? Go with a loved one because, they might not necessarily think of something that you're not thinking about, well, doctor, just tell me plainly, what does this mean? What do I have to do? What am I looking at this drug? Oh, we started this drug, I'm feeling this, could it be because of this? Speak up. I i i, I did not, like, I didn't call the doctor every time something happened, although like my husband wanted me to. And I'm like, it's not that big of a deal. Even it got to the point where the doctor's like, here's my number, if she's going through this or going through that or something that's not normal, give me a call, because I'm like, it's not a big deal. But I don't want people to think of it that way. Nothing is too small, nothing is too stupid. That you're feeling a certain way. Oh, well, the doctor said I could feel this way. Okay, but how long has it been? It's been 2 weeks. He didn't quite say that it would be this long. So let me
Mm,
find out.
mm,
We talked about advocacy last time, and it's just so important. Again, our providers are not out here to judge us, but implicit bias is very, very strong. And so they might not go into something because they might feel like you may not understand, but let them know that you do understand,
yeah.
and ask those questions.
Wow. Okay. I wanted to ask you about, I think you've talked about your energy, your focus, confidence at work. Did it affect your confidence? No.
No,
Okay.
that I couldn't do. No, no. I
And
had big projects that I delivered.
you
Yeah.
delivered. Okay. What about, I think you've talked about mentally, your faith, your support, be it family, community, friends. Okay. Now, take us to that big moment. So we are at the end of 2012. You talked about the MLK Day in 2013 that they said this is really dire now. Take us into that moment up until your
So
journey to Philly.
yeah, so MLK weekend, I'm in the hospital through the end of January. Like I said, that was the hardest, the one of the longest
Oh, sorry, Belinda.
hospitalization. Uh-huh.
MLK Day, for those who are watching us from other places, it's
Martin
I think
Luther King holiday in the
yeah,
middle of January.
middle of January is
Yes.
a Monday.
Yes.
Yes, so please
Yes.
pardon us.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Um, so then 2 weeks after that, I come home with the PIC line, the IV line to give myself IV infusions. It's twice a day, so I have to take it with me to work. Um, so I connect it to, and it's in a like a little ball, the medicine. I put it in my coat pocket, give myself twice a day. And then February 14th, 2013, I'm at work and I'm just, it's almost like people who have migraines and they have this something called aura, which is they feel that the migraine coming on. I know and feel like something is coming on. It's just this rush still comes over me, this weakness, this like I gotta lay down. I'm just not feeling good. So in the middle of the day, my coworker noticed that I'm a little flushed and asked me if I was okay. And I was like, not really. I was like, but I get off at 3:30. I want to stay. He's like, no, you got to go. Calls my manager. My manager comes down. It's like, you got to go. I said, well, I'm parked 3.5 blocks from the hospital. I said, I can't walk it. So they go to the front desk and ask for courtesy rides. I do get a courtesy ride to the car. By the time I get to the car, I am bawling because I know what's coming next. I know it's a hospitalization that's coming. Um, I know that I don't know what will happen because I can't get the stent work done anymore. Um, so I don't call anyone in the car during that time would have been my lunchtime. So my husband calls and he said, "Oh, how you doing?" Blah blah. I was like, "I'm good." I didn't tell him that I'm going home. My mom also happens to call. So what's weird was people calling me in the middle of the day. um, and I was like, "I'm good. I'm gonna go home. I'm gonna lay down." Um, but when I get home, I pack a little bag because I'm thinking by the next day I probably might end up in the hospital. And I go lay down, and then I have an answering machine at home 13 years ago. I hear Dr. Ford, my hepatologist, on the phone. It's like, Belinda, we need to talk. I run downstairs and I pick up the phone. That's when she tells me, she says, we have a possible liver for you. I'm sleeping. I'm like, okay, what does this mean? I'm not far enough on the transplant list that they will prepare me ahead in case the call comes. If you're in that zone, they give you a pager, they tell you that you can't travel this many miles away
Mm,
from home, pack a bag. I've been prepared for any of this. They prepare you for when the call comes, what you do, what's gonna happen. I have no idea. So she's like, it's a pediatric liver. She passed away from the flu. You will receive Tamiflu after surgery. So I'm listening and I'm like, okay, okay. She says, okay. I was like, she said, you have to tell me whether you accept or not. And I said, well, Dr. Ford, what should I say? She said, I can't tell you, but all I can tell you is it's a good liver. I said, I accept. She's like, okay, I'm going to call infectious disease and see that we can still proceed because you are on IV. I had to be on that IV antibiotics for 6 weeks. It's only been like a week and a half. The next thing I know, a transplant coordinator is calling me and asking me when I can be in Philly. And I was like, oh boy. Okay. I said, I can leave now and be there in 2 hours. That's when I called my husband. I was like, oh, I've been homesick. Philly just called. There's a possible liver. He's like, well, what? He doesn't know from me. Like, what do we do? I was like, I gotta go. He's like, can you go in the evening? This is around 4 p.m. I'm like, no, I think I have to go now. He was like, but the kids, but like, my sister Donna is in Ghana. My best friend is in, I think Akua was in Virginia. Genevieve um, is in New Jersey. Like, my mom just left to go to Chicago. It's like, the boys, what do we do? He said, can you wait? Give me 30 minutes to get home. I said, I don't even have that time. So I was like, okay, I'm going to use that 30 minutes to pack, call work. At the end of the day, we don't have anyone to really leave our kids. It's Thursday evening. My husband said, I got to stay with the kids. We got to try to make it as normal as possible. To tell the kids, oh, mom has to go in back to the hospital. She's not feeling. They're used to me going by myself. So it wasn't anything out of the ordinary for them. But the older one had soccer, and he said, am I still able to go to soccer? My husband said, yes, we're going to soccer. So he said, babe, you drive. I'll figure something out. I'll call you. By the time I hit the road, my best friend in New Jersey's calling me. Kel's called me about this. I'll meet you in Philly. She's just as far from Philly as I am from Philly. I get there within 30 minutes. I'm in the operating room. I didn't even get to see my friend, but she was there um, with me for the surgery.
So what time is this?
By
You get
this
a call at what
time,
time and what
I
time
I
are you?
got the call probably around 3:30, 4 o'clock. I leave out maybe about 7, get there around 8:30, 9 o'clock. I get in as I am like undressing the EKG. Um, I had been there a week before, so they had labs, they had everything that they needed, just EKG and blood pressure and some vitals. And within 30 minutes, I was on the operating table. But they had to wait to finish doing some more work, pathology work on the liver, on the organ or the graft that they call it. And so I'm going through anesthesiology, signing consent, and then we wait. And that waiting period is when like I think I started crying again. And the anesthesiologist like, are you okay? And I was like, I'm just praying. And I was just looking at the clock. By now it's 10, a little after 10 p.m. There's a nurse sitting at a desk underneath the clock. And I said, God, you have not brought me this far to leave me. I am not leaving this hospital without an organ, because having have been able to get a chance to work in the operating room pharmacy, we prepare drugs for transplant and it comes back because something happened with the organ after they finished testing it. It wasn't good, and people are sent back home. I heard those stories countless of times. And I said, I'm not going to be one. And I said, I ask you to rewrite my story. Whatever the story was going to be tonight is going to be the one that I get transplanted. And the next day I'm in a lot of pain. I can deal with it. I'm ready for this. Um, and the anesthesiologist just was just holding my hand. I had not eating all day. I was hungry. I was shaking. She said, that's a good thing that you haven't eaten all day. You handle anesthesia very good. Kind of just something to help me laugh. A little after 11 o'clock, the nurse picks up a call that came in, and then they said, we are a go. And 6, 7 hours later, the transplant had gone through. I was in a lot of pain. I remember that much. My best friend who came to be with me is a pharmacist. While the nursing was trying to figure out a machine for patient controlled pain medication, she said I was screaming, crying because I was coming to with not a lot of pain medication on board. She went down the hall, screamed for a doctor, and it's like she needs something right now. And within seconds, there was something being shot up in my vein to just help me calm. If my husband was with me, I don't know, he would have known to do that. He would have been like, oh, honey, they're working on it. They're coming, they're coming. But just the way God orchestrated everything, just so amazing. And there's so many little things that I can go on about to just demonstrate that God was in this, that, like I said, that hospitalization was one of the hardest and longest, knowing that my archbishop talks about the ninth month miracle when a pregnant woman is at that time in labor, when it's time to push. That's the hardest. That's the time you feel the most pain, when your back is against the wall. And I think I was experiencing my 9 month pregnancy labor in that January hospitalization, knowing that this was coming down the line after I just hung off for a little bit more. um, I would have this baby, this miracle at the end of it all.
Mm. So I see the emojis and God lined everything up. I see. Thank
God
you for
sure did.
sharing your story. So, what date is this? This is February. No,
February 14th,
February.
2013.
Oh, wow. That was a lovely gift. So, this is a pediatric liver. How old was the child?
Child was 8.
Child was 8. Thank God. And so you go through the surgery, everything goes well, and then you come back home.
Mhm.
And
Yes.
what
Come
has
back home and you're realizing your new normal. You go through some 20 some years not being well, and then, you know, you have a life transformation event, and then, it's like life is supposed to go right back, and you be normal. And, it's like as I was getting ready to go back to work, 3 or 4 months later, I started having panic attacks. I was never introduced to like support groups. It's like I said, I wasn't at the point where I was going to be prepared. But I think at the same time, God was preparing me in a way that I really only needed Him. I
mm,
could stand on Him. Um, and during these attacks, I had called my local hepatologist, and he was like, "Look at how far you come. No one is going to expect you to overnight be normal. Your new normal. It's going to take some time. So give yourself credit for coming this far. You're going to do just fine, you know. Um, and I went back to work. At this time, also was a season in our lives where my husband had an opportunity to work overseas. And at this time, he has given up so much for our family, so much for me, that I couldn't be like, no, I need you here. How am I going to navigate two boys, full time work, soccer, taekwondo, all of this?
mm.
But I said, go for it, honey. God would supply. So we talk it through. We got help in the house, amazing neighbors that, extended help. Had co-workers who would switch a shift with me here and there. I was a manager before, but now I'm back to not managing, and so now I work weekends. So just the navigating, with planning, it all worked out. The kids came out all right. Everyone got to where they needed to go. I had nights where, I drop this one in soccer, then I take this one to take one. No, I go back and pick this one up and that one up. And, I marvel out I did. And I didn't do it all on my own. It was just the grace of God, trusting in Him that He will get me through the season. And my mom was here, will help us. My mom didn't drive. So anything else that she could do outside of that, was a great help. Had um, my sisters, Idana and Aname, in the local area. My friends would drive down to come relieve me here and there. So like, I was so blessed that I felt like there are people who are in worse situations. That who am I to complain? Who am I to be like? I am alive. Probably at this liver transplant right at the time that this opportunity came for my husband, so that I could take on this stuff. Like I said, I could go on and on about how things were just orchestrated. That when you think about it, it couldn't have been just us doing it. So then, my new normal. And we just put one foot in front of each other and in front of the other and just kept chugging away. And here we are today,
Here
13
we
years
are
later.
today. We'll talk a little bit about 2013 to 2019 and to date. But there's a question here that I think we need to look at. It says, please tell us how you relate to the donor family in the midst of their loss.
Hmm. Yeah.
If you,
8 year old. I had a 7 year old at that time. So I couldn't say that I could relate, but I could relate. From the very After everything, before I left Philly, they described to me how, you know, you can I ask, how do we communicate? Can I find out? They're like, no, basically all of that stuff is sealed. So from the very beginning, I started writing, and you write a letter to the living legacy in Philly. They tell you what you can include. You can include your name. You can ask them that you want to meet. You can include your address. I think first name basis. Um, and so I wrote to them after the transplant, thanking them for their brave decision to donate their child's organs. I gave them an update. I talked about also a loss that I experienced at that time. 13 days after my transplant, my father passed away from liver cancer in New Jersey. I was able to see him for about an hour before he passed away. But we took him back to Ghana, and I wasn't able to go to the funeral because I was recovering. Talked about things that were happening in my life, going back to work, my children. And then I wrote to them at Christmas every year at the anniversary, February 14th. And then one day I received an envelope, and I think I wrote to them for about 5 years, 5, 6 years, before they responded. They finally responded, thanking me for keeping up with them. They said that they enjoyed receiving and looking forward to receiving the letters. Their daughter, I came to find out at that time, and then found out her age then, saved 7 lives. So basically, she had organs, heart, pancreas, cornea, um, kidneys, but I was the only person that has kept in touch. But they're still dealing with it, and so that's why it took so long to write. So after that, they had asked to meet, and the time that we were going to meet, I think I couldn't make it. We still haven't met, but we correspond, we text, we call. She has an older sister. I don't keep up with her personally, but I keep up with her through her parents. And I do whatever I can to keep Hannah's life memory alive. And that's my relationship with Jen and Joe and Kelsey.
What a
Um,
blessing.
Pio, yes.
Oh, okay, let me read a few of the comments and then you tell us life after, a little bit of life after from 2013. A few comments here. It all worked out for your good. God indeed led this battle and won for his glory. There's a question. I guess the question is, how long was your battle end to end? If you can just maybe the person then joined from the very beginning, end to end. Yeah.
It began with inflammatory bowel disease diagnosis in I have it written down, telling you my in
20.
1980 1989, and then a biliary, bile duct disease in 1993, all the way to transplant in 2013. So my liver survived a good 19 years, but I was told 10 years needing a liver transplant, but I went through to 2013 before I needed one.
Okay. Another comment says, endurance was her middle name. I guess is your middle name. There's a question here which we're going to get to, but maybe we can answer it before you. So what advice do you have for others who are fighting? Who are fighting, going
We're
through a
fighting.
thing or
Okay.
two? Oh,
Don't be afraid to let people in. Create a small community, a village. Um, there's help out there, but I think sometimes with very strong people, it's hard to let help in. Um, but we know this saying, let go and let God. Let God in. If you are a Christian, if you're a spiritual person, prayer. My husband got the CD of um, healing verses that will play when I'm sleeping, that he made sure played in the hospital when I was in the hospital. Sometimes I was just too drained to be like, get into that battle mode and that fighting mode. And that's what like my family did, not just that support. Like I said, they organized 24-hour prayer chains. I mean, like I knew people would pray. I know people were interceding for me. So the family to help with those practical things as well as those spiritual things. Um, and again, let people in, build that community, but also rely on God. He won't give you more than you can handle. I'm like, dang, this is a lot to handle. However, I trust.
Mm.
This was my battle. Somebody once said to me, we were in a room, and she said, if we were all told to write down our troubles, our hurts, our whatever we're going through, and put it in this pile, and you thinking that my neighbor looking across the street and like, oh wow, they have these cars, they're living a good life, or thinking, you don't have any problems, and we all put that in there. She was like, I will be quick to find mine because my battle is the battle that God has given me. I don't know if I can fight my neighbor's battle. I don't know if I can fight this person's battle, so let go and let God and let that village help you. It doesn't have to be 20 people. It could be two people who want to help and are dedicated to help you, So get that support and just cry out to God because He's a faithful God and He's a loving God. He will not put us through more than we can handle.
Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. Somebody wrote, wow, I appreciate your sense of gratitude. That is Belinda for you. Then let me just ask you two more questions and we'll land the plane. Sometimes experiences like this don't change, you know, don't our experiences like this change us, change our
Mhm,
perspectives.
mhm,
And you've talked some, but can you relate how it has changed you professionally
mhm.
and in other ways that you can share with us?
Professionally, um, I I've been through, and hopefully some people, my coworkers, some people that here would understand what I'm saying. I've been through some things at work, but I'm more um, relaxed. I'm using what I've been through my journey to also help others. Like I said, I was working downtown, worked, weekends. Luckily, a position became available at our infusion center in Towson. That was just Monday through Friday, no holidays, no weekends, by the grace of God. And then furthering my career and work, I now have an opportunity to have direct contact with patients. Um, and when I talk to patients, every single person that I've talked to, I've shared my journey briefly, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, where people want to get a little bit more, and people had even asked for prayer. And so, how'd you do it? I said, God, prayer. Would you pray for me? Oh, keep me in your prayers, And there's no issue with at work with just taking someone's hands and praying. My nurses even admire so much that one of my nurses' daughter was going through something, and she actually asked me to keep her daughter in prayer. So I love that. That's where God has put me now because of this. And again, He orders our steps in
Yes.
His Word. So
Oh, I'm getting text messages. What an amazing story. I'm getting all kinds of messages. I want to land the plane. So tell us 2013, well, you've talked a little bit. 2013 to 2026. 13 years. How have you been? How are you navigating life? And
my new normal
your new
is
normal, new
my new
lease on
normal.
life.
Yes, new normal is great. I am happy to report that because of the inflammatory bowel disease, there's increased risk of colon cancer. So every year I have to get a colonoscopy. just to see how things are going. I'm currently still on medication. I do Entyvio injections at home every 2 weeks and some other medications and anti-rejection medications that require, certain um, surveillances and keeping up certain things because of risk of one thing or the other. But for the first time in however many years it is that I've had inflammatory bowel disease from
89.
1989 up until now, I am in clinical remission. There is no inflammation. Ulcerative colitis is inflammation in the lining of the colon and intestines that doesn't necessarily heal, and so then you're just maintaining and keeping it from bleeding all the time. I have no inflammation in my colon. If you were to take my colon and tell someone that this is someone that has ulcerative colitis or Crohn's, they won't believe you. So for the very first time, I have clinical remission. I've had to battle a few things here and there because that inflammatory bowel disease also can cause inflammation in some other places. But they've come, got healed, moved on. Um, However, one thing I do want to point out, some time in the middle of that in 2019 was the very first time I felt ill enough to be admitted into the hospital after the transplant. And my liver enzymes were kind of off the roof, which they were thinking that I probably got um, rejection. But after some tests and some MRI, found out that that bile duct disease, that PSC, as I described at the beginning of the program, has returned. So what led me to get liver disease has returned. However, um, if my colitis, my Crohn's disease is under control, then the bile duct is not getting inflamed. It's kind of quiet. So since now that I'm in clinical remission, that's quiet. The liver is going to be quiet, and we continue to chug along, and we continue to live each day to the fullest, and wait to see what God has for me in my next chapter.
Oh my goodness. Let me just read a few comments here because all glory be to God. God is so good. There was a question here. And Belinda, think of your pardon words to ask because there are a few questions I was going to ask, but I think you've answered them. Let me see. There was a comment here about how often do you need to do labs, etc., to monitor the function of the transplanted liver? How are you? How are you coping with working and your new normal? Thanks, thank you for sharing your glory. Oh, your
Yes,
story. Sorry. Thank you for sharing your story.
I have labs to check everything as far as liver function every 3 months. I have been on the same doses of stuff for the longest time, and everything is always in range. I had been anemic for years because of the bleeding and all that, but my hemoglobin is normal, has been normal for a while. I have to do a skin check every year because the anti-rejection medication that I have increases skin cancer. I have to check my bones with a DEXA scan every 3 years. Of course, the usual things, mammogram, dental, all of that. I have a liver scan every 3 to 4 years just to see that make sure that there's no scarring in the liver. But so long as the labs are okay, then we know that the liver is functioning just fine. Studies show that, livers can live for a long time. But, I have more than surpassed, the average time. And I have no doubt that I'll be into my 80s and 90s with this liver.
Amen. Amen. I know this woman. I've known Belinda for over 20 years. Resilience, strength, and joy. Yeah, reminding me of something that you never know what people are going through, but you never show it. You never showed it, except those around you. But the joy and the peace around you and how you made people feel. Thank you for sharing the story. Now I want you to give us your parting words Thank you everyone for joining today. I know that today wasn't the type of a lot of questions. So thank you for joining us. And if you are not subscribed, please, we would honor you being a part. We would be honored for you to be a part of this conversation and of our breaking through community. Please subscribe. And Belinda, I will give you the last word. And this conversation has been so inspiring, and thank you for being vulnerable, being open with your story. I hope somebody has been inspired, somebody has been encouraged, but I will give you the last word, and we will um, land the plane and say goodbye till we meet. I believe our next
Next month.
conversation will probably be in May.
Yeah. Okay.
Will be in May, I know for sure. Belinda, all for you. But
Yeah.
thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you on behalf of our audience, our breaking through community, our breaking through family. Thank you so much. This has
Glad.
been, thank you.
I'm glad I could share, and I hope at least someone can hold on, or someone can tell someone that, hey, doesn't matter what you're going through, that um, you can survive. I know that sometimes it doesn't always end the way we want to, but at the same time, um, you fight with that same resilience, and people around you are watching, and people around you are taking it in. That's why I said, for what my family and friends have given up, where do I go saying that I can't make it? I can't get, yes, they're not feeling my pain, my physical pain, but they're struggling in their own ways, and to this day, I can't tell you how this has affected my husband, but I know it has. And you can go through. I wrote some things here that said, looking back for someone who's trying to navigate multiple roles while going through a difficult season. I say, hold on to your faith and trust in God. He will send you helpers. Create a village. Sometimes it's not too much. It's not so much that you want to hold on to, but maybe what you may need is to let go. As this, recognize that you do not need to do this alone, or all by yourself. As women, and especially Black women, we're strong. We want to hold up the family. We want to bring the income. We want to do this. We want to do that. But there comes a time where you need to let go, let God, and you need to let others in. That does not mean that your strength is diminished, or you're giving anything away. I had some dark days and nights and even seasons where I cried. I cried a lot, and all I could say was, "God, help me." I never asked, "Why me? Why not me?" There are a lot of people going through a lot of things. I'm not the only one. My journey continues. It's been 13 years since my transplant, and I'm truly grateful to God for healing me, to my donor family, to my family and friends. And I just live life to its fullest, and realize that I'm not going to be bothered by the small things, and try to remind myself every so often about that. But yeah, that's it.
Oh, Belinda, today I don't have a tissue, so I can't let my tears down. But there have been so much gratitude for you in the comments. Somebody said, whilst you were going through this, she was still there for me. Belinda, I'm eternally grateful. I have some
Um,
messages on my thing that I've been asked to forward to you. Um, so many messages. Thank you. Thank you for honoring us with your story.
yes.
I know you will come again
Mhm.
to encourage our community. I can't even land the plane, but thank you,
Thank you, Auntie Marion, for
and
you were also there for me, and appreciate you and your family.
yeah.
Thank you for this opportunity, and um, I'll continue to tell the story to help many others. Maybe write a book.
Yes, yes, we can't wait to get the title and start promoting. Thank you. God bless you and God keep you. And
Thank
thank
you
you
so
everyone for
much. Thank you
joining
all
us.
for joining. Appreciate you
Uh,
all.
we are also honored that you came and you shared your story. So I will send you the messages that I'm getting. I see the emoji signs, the emojis coming up, the love emojis. Thank you, Belinda.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your story. Very inspirational. I'm reading here. God is good all the time.
All the time.
Oh God, the things we take for granted, Belinda. Thank you
Mm.
for sharing your story. Let go, let God, and allow people in. Allow your tribe to help
Mhm.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Auntie Marianne.
Thank you. Thank you.
That was amazing.